Hey guys, Shane here. So welcome to this tutorial, which is going to be a first for the channel, which is how to create seascapes. So I'm going to show you to make a very simple seascape for your model ships that is very user friendly and quite easy to do. So we're going to be taking a look at doing the seascape for this 1/700 scale Arleigh Burke class US destroyer, and I'm going to talk you through step by step what I did to get to this end result. So I've made up, should I say, a very simple base from balsa wood. I've already sprayed this glossy black, and I'm just going to seal it off with some masking tape in preparation for the next couple of steps. So to give us our seascape itself and the random pattern of waves, we're going to take some kitchen foil or aluminium foil or aluminum foil, can't even say the word, for our seascape. And because we're dealing with a 1/700 scale ship, I don't want to rust it too aggressively, so I'm just going to basically flex it and then keep test fitting it and seeing how I feel about it. Do not crunch it up into a ball. It's going to be way out of control and it'll be overskilled. So this technique really works really well for 1/700 scale, and I've seen it work okay for 1/350 too, but 700 is really where it's most appropriate, I find. So we're going to be using Mod Podge to give us our glossy effect. You can also use it as a glue. So I'm going to use this to glue down the tin foil to the top of our base. You can either just use a white glue or Palmer's glue or Elmer's glue, should I say. It's totally up to you. One thing I found with this product is, God, does it smell. It's non-toxic, but it's not the most pleasant smelling thing in the face of the planet. So I fairly fired through this part because I didn't like the smell of it much. And I'm going to make sure that I I'm going to make sure that I put quite a bit of this down. I want to make sure that the edges do not begin to lift. That is really important, that they do not lift. So I'm going to focus, make sure there's a good bit of enough glue on the edges to ensure this. Once I've laid a healthy amount of Mod Podge or white glue down, I'm going to seat our tin foil. So I'm going to run my finger along the edges to really ensure that the edges are firmly adhered and affixed to our base. That is very important that we do this. I also want to be careful that we don't flatten down all of the kind of the wave pattern that we've created. So as you can see, even before we start applying and creating our wave gradient, if you will, or our sea effect, we can already see the waves, and that's the really handy thing about this technique. It's a very simple way of creating random wave patterns. I find when you try to sculpt them, because human beings being what they are, we tend to gravitate towards certain patterns and rhythm. The sea doesn't behave that way. It's a force of nature that it doesn't follow our rules. So I find that the tinfoil is utterly random in the patterns it develops. Now, when we come to doing the wake, then there's a pattern that kind of happens. So since this is a waterline model from Hobby Boss, it does give us a separate lower hull, and I'm actually going to use this to create an imprint of the silhouette of the ship. Just turn it upside down, and you can see the outline just very vaguely of our hull. Now, I should have done, before we painted, was I should have flattened down that area and made it totally smooth. However, I didn't think of it at the time, and I would recommend you do that. So for our first layer of colour to make our sea, I'm going to take some Vallejo Model Air Blue. It can be any blue, but avoid bright colours. Keep it deep, keep it quite dark. So this is a very dark blue. Now on camera it almost looks like black. If you have a very dark blue spray primer like a rattle can, you can use that here, save a lot of time. try to avoid using light colours for this. We have to work our way up in a gradient, just like how we highlight a figure. Doing the ocean, it's no different. If we go for too bright a colour too soon, it makes it look very unconvincing and unrealistic. And I'm going to apply a couple of layers. I do not want to see any silver showing through, or the entire effect will be undone. So after a few layers of blue and it's been fully allowed to dry, we're going to start working on adding the gradient and the wake. So I'm going to take some Vallejo, or should I say AK, I think that's Haze Blue from their RAF set, which is basically a blue-grey. So you can use any kind of colours you want for this, but kind of keep them blue-greys and like kind of green-grey blue type colours. Keep it dark, keep it neutral, not too bright. And I'm just going to start adding some random lines, just to add a bit of depth and to insinuate that there's, the sea's like 3 miles deep rather than the length of a box or a couple of mil because of our tinfoil. I'm keeping my paint relatively thinned. Now I went in a bit heavy in places, but I can fix that later. You can always come back with the original blue if you don't like it and cut some more of the dark blue back into that if you feel you've gone too light too quick. So there we have our first layer of gradient. So once we have our ocean grey, because I just checked and see what name of the paint is, so it's AK Ocean Grey. Now we're going to take their Azurin Blue, I believe it's called. Now this is a very light colour, and I'm going to mix some of our ocean grey back into it, about 50-50. I don't want it too bright. It has to look like it's organic and that they both belong together. And I'm going to mix that into my airbrush, put a few drops of Vallejo thinner, which works fine. And I'm actually going to use the upturned lower hull of our ship as our base, and I'm going to start working on the wake. So I'm going to have like a little line just gradiating out from the center line of the ship. I'm not going to try to fill the entire area of the dark blue and the blue-grey. I really want to avoid doing that. So I'm really just going to focus just along the edges where the ship would be. And again, if you get too much of it down, you can always come back and with the preceding colour undo it. So now to start simulating the wake of the ship, we're going to start taking greys. We're not going to use white. So the two colours actually end up using are Vallejo model, or should I say game colour, ghost grey and stonewall grey. These are two light greys, and I'm going to use them kind of in sequence. And this is going to lay the foundation for the wake of the ship. Now, be disciplined with this colour. Now, I go a bit heavy in a couple of places, so I have to come back and clean that up. But I'm just going to have it just around the hull line of the ship. So we've already created a very nice little silhouette there of where the ship's going to be sitting. And I'm just going to focus this lighter colour as lightly as possible along the edges. Slowly working it up, doing lots of test fits in between until I'm happy with it. Now once that's been allowed to dry, it's time to affix our vessel to the base. And again, I'm just going to use Mod Podge for this. It's better that you use the Mod Podge rather than any type of glue, because this will dry 100% clear, and we want to make sure that it sits and does not have any type of difference from the water effects that we're going to lay in a few minutes. Now, like I was saying, I really should have smoothed out the area within the silhouette of the ship that we created, but I just didn't think of it at the time. It's not a big deal, but it would have made life a little bit easier, because I actually had to push it down and hold it there for a few minutes to ensure that there was no rises. If you do get them, when we get to the later steps of this, it's very easy to mask and conceal them. So we're going to take our ship, very carefully going to push it down into place. There's a lot of delicate parts on vessels of this scale, actually of any vessel. And we're going to push down, Make sure it's even. So we're also just going to blend any of the areas of the Mod Podge that seeped out from under the ship, that's exactly what we want, because that's going to create no gaps between the ship and the base, to make it look like it's all organic and like the ship actually belongs there. And once that's been allowed to dry, we can start applying the Mod Podge relatively heavy. Not too heavy or you'll get air bubbles, but just apply a smaller brush amount of it at a time and kind of dab it in. If you do get air bubbles, you can pop them with your hobby blade before it dries. This takes about 24 hours to dry, and when it dries, it is totally crystal clear. And I'm kind of doing it in a bit of like a dabbing or stippling motion. And I'm just going to slowly start working it up. It doesn't have to be too thick, it's just to give the sea its glossy appearance. However, we're going to actually get the wave and the wake of the vessel. We're going to use a different means to do that. So this does take a little bit of time, however, you must resist the urge to rush. If you charge through this and get impatient and just lay like a massive dollop of this and expect for the best, it will crack, it will shrink, and you will hate your life. And I do not want you to hate your life, I want you to love life. So put small amounts of it down at a time, keep it relatively smooth, keep the stippling motion to keep the emphasis on the waves, because bearing in mind the tinfoil is still manageable even though it's glued down, and we don't want to accidentally crush down the waves. So I'm gently stippling, and also the stippling will also give realistic water effects as well, making like bows and draws within the waves as well. So slowly working it up, making sure there's plenty on the edge. And any place I get the Mod Podge up onto the hull of the ship, I'm just going to take either a cotton bud like you see here, or take a clean brush, dip it in water, and just remove the excess. It is a water-based product, so a dampened brush or a Q-tip or a swab will get rid of any excess. So to get our bow waves, we're going to take AK Water Effects, which is basically an acrylic resin kind of clear gel. Now you could also use heavy gel medium from an art shop, I just couldn't find any. And then we're going to take our Ghost Grey and Stonewall Grey, and we're going to start making up our bow waves. I actually found, as I did this, the best type of palette for this is actually just take a bit of greaseproof paper or parchment paper and do your mixing there. So I'm going to take a relatively large amount of this, just a few big dollops. And I'm going to mix our Ghost Grey and our Stonewall Grey together. Now I put a little bit too much paint the first time round, and I had to come back and use thinner coats to kind of add more depth to it. So the amount of paint I'm putting in here, I recommend you don't put 2 drops like I did into it of each colour. Literally the tip of a brush of either colour, and mix it together. Also put maybe a drop of water into it too to slightly water it down. I'm going to start stippling it in to the stern of the ship to create our bow wave. It's good to make sure you have a few photographs of the actual ship at sea and understand how the bow or how the bow waves and the wake actually behaves on each ship. Depending on how choppy the ocean is, what type of propulsion system the ship has, and also its speed will greatly dictate how fast and how severe and how intense the bow wave will be. The Arla Burks, especially when they're at speed, have a pretty impressive bow wake, and then a secondary, I don't know the proper word for it, I'm not a sailor, then they have a pretty noticeable secondary bow wake just in line with where the bridge is, which you'll see me put in. One thing I'll say is do not let this dry on any part of the hull that you don't want it in. Just like with the Mod Podge, if you take a clean brush you can wash it away. Also, don't use a new brush like I did. This actually destroyed a few brushes on me because I didn't quite understand what the resin was going to do until it did it. And I'm just beginning to extend out these bow waves, as you can see here. Taking my time, just thinking about what I'm doing and just going for it. And you can kind of see that I'm not extending out the full length of the base with these bow waves, and you're like, well, bow waves are massive, Shane, and they are. However, they dissipate the further they travel from the ship, so when this dries we're going to come back in with more watered down layers of our water effects to create that dissipation of the bow wave. I kind of got a bit nervous when I did that. I kind of felt like I had broken the cardinal rule of wakes and that you're not meant to put white, kind of like rapid water along the entire length of the ship. However, we're going to make this work for us. And once I looked at some photographs of these vessels when they're at flank speed, they do create a pretty big ass wake. So there's our first very kind of rough layer of our wake, of that kind of churned up water. Now I'm going to come back and start adding up a little bit more volume, just adding a little bit more of our water effects that's been tinted with our paints, and just building it up in places. I'm going to focus quite a bit onto the bow wake of this vessel, because that's where a lot of the kind of dramatic swirl of water is going to occur. Once it dries, it does dry translucent, but I put far too much paint into it. So now what we're going to do is, we're going to take our same colour. This time I'm going to focus more on the darker grey, which is the Stonewall grey. And I'm going to apply only a small amount, and also mix a couple of drops of water into it. And I'm going to begin to work it into the areas of the wake that we've created already, as I felt I made it look too much one-dimensional. And I feel I need to put another layer that's going to be more transparent and slightly kind of a darker colour, just to break it up. Because of the translucentness of this, it doesn't matter that I'm actually putting a darker colour on top, because they're going to work together. I'm also going to start extending the bow waves directly out to the edge of the base in a few minutes, and we're going to be using our watered down . So I've really reduced the amount of paint in the mixture, and I've put a drop or two of water into it. And I'm beginning now just to trace over the areas, and as you can see, by the time I get to the very edge of the base, it's so light that it almost disappears. I'm just slowly working it back. Also, kind of keep in mind the the ship is moving, so the wake is going to bow out behind the ship because there's resistance against it. You know, the current of the ocean, if you will, could be going against it, so it might be pulling it a certain direction. Again, I'm not entirely sure how that works, but that's just the visual of how it seems to go when you look at enough photographs of it. So I'm going to try to bow it back, have a slight curve to it, just to make it look a little bit more natural that way, you know. Straight lines do not occur in nature, and I put 1 or 2 straight lines into this bow wake, and I'm not really happy about that, so I had to go back and kind of blend them and fix them. And again, because I've mixed water into our mixture now and really toned down the amount of paint that's in it, it really is becoming translucent. And I'm going to work this over all the areas of the bow of the wake that we've done, just to blend it back and make it look a bit more organic. And you can see how I'm beginning to extend out these bow wakes to the furry edges of the base. I'm not going to do it with all of them. Some of them I'm only going to let them extend a small distance away from the ship and then just utterly dissipate. And that's going to give us a lot of visual interest, which is exactly what we want for a seascape. As you can see, I'm taking our watered down mixture, and I'm even not actually tracing entire full lines. I'll have the line come out and then I'll let it break and kind of follow where I think it would go, and then like pick it up again to make it look like it's been like dissipated by the ocean, and it just makes it a little bit more interesting and more believable. And at the same time then I'm coming back into the areas that we've already painted in with our water effects and applying it to, just to add a bit more depth to it, because I felt that I had applied too much colour into the first one and I need to make it look a little bit more realistic, and that's how I actually fixed that. So with our layer allowed to dry, you can kind of see that's already come translucent. And now I'm going to take a very small amount of stonewall grey, or sky grey, or any type of colour like that, like a light grey. I'm going to really mix a lot of water into it, almost like it's a wash. And I'm just going to begin to link some of the inner parts of the wake, like the off waves, together, as well as I'm going to start touching the tops of some of the ridges of the waves to create some like white caps, if you will, or whatever they're called. Also, as you're going, make sure you're cleaning off any parts of the jello, the water effects that you get up onto the ship's hull, because it does not dry the same way as our Mod Podge does. So even though it's translucent, it will look unconvincing, so just make sure you don't allow it to get up too high up onto the hull. And I'm just allowing it to kind of radiate out from the larger bow waves that we've done, or like the off waves. And as you kind of see, I'm kind of simulating that they're losing energy, so they're beginning to kind of trail off and kind of disappear into the ocean. And when this dries, it's going to be really subtle. And I'm also kind of beginning now to edge in some of the ridges of our waves, just to add a bit of definition to that. Because after all, the sea should not be calm. For the amount of water that we're kicking up, it will look more realistic if the sea is a bit choppy. So we're also going to start coming in a few minutes and painting in with our watered down solution the tops of the waves. You will see that I keep coming back with our watered down solutions and going back to the original waves just to kind of blend it all together. Now, it's all organic, it has to be as one, if you will, and that's the best way to do it. Just keep blending them together. And anytime I see like the top of a wave crest, I'll paint it in with this watered down solution to just add a bit of interest and detail, and it really makes the sea become choppy and interesting. So we're coming back up to our bow wave. I'm going to add a bit more mass to it, as well as some more blending work. So even though when you look at my brush it looks like I'm packed full of paint, it's not. It's actually because of the nature of the resin. It's white to begin with before it dries, so it makes it look like I've put a load of paint into that resin. I haven't. It's literally just the tip of a brush of paint and then a drop or two of water to water it down. I'm beginning to work in this wash because that's basically the consistency it should have when you apply it to your base as a wash. And I'm actually going to start applying this in between some of the waves to kind of show like kind of foam and churned up water. Really focus that in to the areas directly behind the bow wake and the actual wake of the vessel behind the stern. So I'm going to start adding some foam in between the waves, and basically I've just really watered down the solution we've been using, and it should have the consistency when you apply it off your brush as a wash. If you lose the glossiness, do not panic. You can always come back with Mod Podge and come over and like podge over it, if you will, to get the gloss back onto your seascape. I kind of liked how mine looked, so I didn't do that in the end. I'm just slowly adding this foam in between these waves and let them dissipate out. And it's just a way of adding more visual interest and more things going on. I might also even layer up some of these offshoots of the wake, as you can see how I'm doing here. As you can see, there's almost no paint on the brush, and it's really just a watered down water effect solution. Now I'm going to start adding some crests to the waves directly ahead of the wake, because the sea looks too calm. Unless it's like sailing into a harbour or some type of breakwater, it shouldn't be that smooth. And so I'm going to add some crests, just using again the watered down solution. And I'm just tracing the tops of these crests that we've formed through the hardened Mod Podge and the tinfoil base. It's a little bit hard to see in this angle, but I'm actually like looking almost at eye level just to see where these crests are. And I'm just going to slowly pick them out. Like, there is no real fast way to do these seascapes. It does take time, and like this is a very kind of beginner orientated one. Like if you look at some of the other ship modelers, who'll spend weeks doing this, and like their effects are amazing. However, it's a bit more advanced in the scope of this video, so this is just more to give you some inspiration. I'm also going to come back and actually add some foam in front of some of these big bow waves, just to give them a little bit more interest, which you'll see me now start cutting in now in a few moments. But I'll do a little bit at a time. I'll stop, I'll look at it, see do I like it. If I don't, I'll just wipe it away. I'm not going to pick out every wave head here or every ridge of a wave or crest. If you do too much, it kind of becomes a bit of an eyesore. And again, just like everything in model making, less is more. So be measured in your application. And that's the best thing of doing it bit by bit. Slowly but surely. I'm just going to add some foam to the crest or just below the crest of this big wave. Again, it's really watered down. You can see how it's almost going down like a wash. So it's always good to have, again, reference photos of the vessel you're modelling at sea or something of like a comparable size. Again, I'm just picking at some more of these wave heads. Or these crests, should I say. You can tell I was in the infantry, I haven't a clue about any of this stuff. I was a land soldier, goddammit. Now, I'm being very careful not to overwork this part. So again, when you're picking out your waves, take your time, think about it. Apply it gradually. And again, I'm just coming back in with some of the foam, and I'm going to work that in between some of these major waves as well, just to show the water or the surface water being agitated. Again, just take your time and build it up. You know, this is a relatively slow setting product, so you do have a good bit of work time with it. And with that, after a couple of hours, this is what we're left with. So I really hope you found this interesting and useful to you. I've been Shane, thank you so much for watching, stay safe, happy modelling, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye.